Once again, the world of college sports and collegiate athletics and Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics is changing again and a lot with the House settlement. So today's video, I want to do my best to break down how this potentially impacts Ohio State, because I don't think we're done with the changes yet to the world of college football and college sports. We're going to break down the House settlement, kind of a general overview for it. That involves some back pay agreement that's been made between the NCAA and the parties involved, the House, last name is the House. Rev share is here, what that means for NIL, and a variety of issues that still have to be sorted through. Before we dive into that, I love college football. It's awesome. The pageantry, everything about it. It is an elite sport to watch, and I always want to feel that way, and hopefully the House settlement actually helps push us in that direction. If you agree and you love college football, show it by liking today's video right now. I want to briefly mention the back pay. There's going to be around $2.8 million in back pay to athletes who played from 2016 to 2024, who did not get NIL, were not eligible. So that was the crux of the settlement, like the money involved. But there's a lot more that is now kind of fallout from the House settlement. So back pay is important. Of note, Ross Bjork, the Ohio State athletic director, issued this statement. It says the signing of the House settlement Friday by Judge Claudia Wilken will reshape college athletics. Ohio State and schools around the country will now be permitted to directly compensate student athletes through revenue sharing, which is actually institutional NIL rights. The Department of Athletics will fully fund the revenue sharing program, which will total $20.5 million and includes funding for additional scholarships for both women's and men's sports. We remain committed to maintaining the student-athlete model, offering 36 intercollegiate sports and providing scholarships to all 36. So for starters, actually kind of summed it up pretty well. And the main crux here of what the NCAA and as a result of the NCAA, some of the major powers in college sports, the Big Ten, the SEC, etc., the main goal here is to try to provide some semblance of rules and regulations and organizational structure in the NIL era that kind of turned into the Wild Wild West NIL era. The biggest element here is that introduction of rev share and also roster limits. This goes into effect July 1st. Tentative plan is 10 years. It's not really, but kind of has some similarities to a CBA, which, yeah, of course, the NFL has a collective bargaining agreement. There's no bargaining involved. It was a bit more from the courts side of things, but there are some principles that kind of align. First up, the roster limits. Establishes roster limits for schools. The House settlement does. Football moves from 85 to 105. This is not scholarships particularly. This is not you have 105 scholarships and then you get more walk-ons. It's you get 105 total for football and other numbers for different sports, obviously. It doesn't have to be 105 scholarships. It can be 90 scholarships and 15 non-scholarship players, walk-ons, etc. But that is the roster limit. I think the SEC is doing 85 this year. You're probably not going to jump things beyond walk-ons this year from a numbers perspective, but you get 105 players, which is a lot. It's a lot in college football. Rev share is the big thing here. Schools will now share revenue with athletes directly. The 2025, what amounts to a salary cap for all sports, is $20.5 million. And again, that's not just football. You don't get $20.5 million for football. It's for everything. So basketball, baseball, any other sports you want to include. If you want to go pay $1 million for a softball player, that leaves $19.5 for everything else. Now, some schools could cut sports, and they could try to dial things back there. As Ross Bjork said, Ohio State's not going to, which should be the goal, frankly. Also unclear how Title IX fits in here. I think the easiest path would be we're going to assign the rev share based on the revenue brought in, and that goes to that, which means, golf doesn't bring in anything. There's not a lot of rev share to go around. Maybe there's a baseline that everything gets and then directly correlate that. That's kind of still murky. A lot more to come on this, but do you think the House settlement will end up being good for college sports? Y for yes, N for no. I think it is very easy to conflate NIL and rev share as one. It's technically not. NIL is not going away. They are separate potential income streams for all the different college athletes. Again, the goal here is more rules and guidelines and not just the collective did whatever they wanted. And in theory, we don't have to have the same nonsense stories of Nico Maliava leaving because he wanted a pay raise and, Jaden Rashada agreeing to a $13 million deal with Florida and it fell apart because there was never actually any money for it. The goal was to kind of eliminate some of that stuff. And Deloitte is now going to play a massive role in this for college football. They're going to run a clearinghouse of sorts for NIL contracts called NIL Go. $600 or above for these NIL deals is going to have to be approved from the clearinghouse. If it is not approved, it has to be restructured, it has to be redone. There could be punishments. What those are, we don't really know yet. Basically, the goal here is to not let teams circumvent the salary cap, essentially, that's been established for college sports. It wants to make sure these are actually valid business deals and not just, the bagman has returned, so to speak, or the bagman's operating in the public eye, which we will come back to here, by the way. It's trying to cut down on the unchecked pay for play. That's what the goal is here. Now, reports have said that Deloitte officials kind of laid out to AC officials what would have passed. And basically, the figure that came about was about if you did an actual public company, if you got a deal with Beats or a deal with EA Sports College Football 26, for example, 90% approval rate. 90% of those were all above and all set. The booster collective deals, which at times are just you're not doing anything, here's money for it. 30% approval rate. So vastly different outcomes there. That clearinghouse is set to go live tomorrow on Wednesday. And I do think there are issues here. And we'll kind of dive into some of those here in a little bit. And I think this is trying to provide some rules and regulations, some oversight to an area that hasn't had any since NIL got going. And the result there has been chaos, and there's probably still going to be some more chaos as we move forward. Now you can get the Ohio State Championship hat, the national championship hat. It is available, chatsports.com/OSU hat. Link will be in the comment section and the description of today's show. Makes for a great Father's Day gift if you haven't got that yet, and maybe do it now so it actually arrives on time. Chatsports.com/OSU hat. In general, seems like a great idea. Clearinghouse, we're going to have things organized. Makes sense. It does remain to be seen, and we're not going to know until it actually happens, if there are going to be punishments and proper usage. I think there have been bad actors, bad faith actors involved in this entire thing, agents, etc., or even agents in quotes. What's to stop them from just not sending it to the clearinghouse? How do you regulate that? That's what makes it hard, right? The goal is to stop some of these fake NIL deals of we're going to pay you $3 million and you're not going to do anything. And in theory, that money mostly comes from the rev share, and how that gets sorted out, again, remains murky. The goal, I think, is to stop the bagmen, they used to operate in the shadows, and they'd pay players secret money, and Cam Newton would get a bag, and everything else that we know was happening in college football. Then they came out of the public eye, and they were able to operate under these booster NIL collectives and just send money however they wanted to. Does it stop them? Do they operate within the rules and guidelines and regulations? Or do we go back to players are getting paid in McDonald's bags? Is that what we're going to go back to? Shout out Tennessee, right? This is kind of the nature of where we're at. There's not really a way to avoid it. This whole thing is kind of built on ice. And you're not moving right now, so it feels stable. But when you start to move, does the whole thing just turn slippery and you fall down? I don't know what's going to happen. Does the whole thing crack and fall apart? It's a lot of unknown right now. We haven't tested it yet. I think what you see a lot of teams do is what Ohio State is doing. And that's kind of essentially move the NIL collectives in-house. They're doing that with the Buckeye Sports Group. There's been plenty of statements issued there by Ohio State. But NIL comes in-house, and it's more controlled and more regulated and less chaotic. And I feel like athletic directors and the athletic department matter more now. This is not the way it used to be where football was Urban Meyer. It was Jim Tressel. They did everything. Yeah, the AD matters for budgets and hiring, But I think there's a lot more juggling involved now. There's a lot more structure that's going to have to be had. You can no longer have plausible deniability. It's in-house. You should know what is happening. It's not just budgets and hires and we hired a good head coach. Now you got to manage the athletic director. Now you got to manage the collective. You got to manage the salary cap. Like, there's a lot that's changed for athletic departments in the past 5 years even. So with that in mind, what is your confidence level in Ohio State AD Ross Bjork? 1 to 10 is your scale, so sound off in the comments. Part of this comes down to enforcement, and the NCAA has lost its power in recent years. I would argue self-inflicted because nobody liked the NCAA, but there is a power gap and a control gap that now has to be filled. And it might be the College Sports Commission, the CSC. They are the ones that have been kind of tabbed to step up and enforce the rules. Former MLB executive Brian Seeley is going to be the CEO of the College Sports Commission. And the crux of this is they're going to have enforcement. And everyone's going to agree. The players, they're going to sign their contracts, so to speak, with schools and scholarships and whatnot. And the schools are going to agree. But will they? Like, what are the actual rules here? Because those still kind of have to be ironed out. And they'll probably change as we go along, too, frankly, which is probably a good thing. You want your rules to be a living, breathing document, right? Will the schools follow them? You have to rein in what has become this wild, wild west NIL era. Like, it has to be dialed back in. It went too far in the other direction. But you did open up Pandora's box. Again, this was the NCAA's fault as far as I'm concerned. Now you got to try to close it. Stuff's already out. It's going to be messy in parts because now with the salary cap being in place, you're also kind of like changing what the market is. Self-imposed. And I think you're going to have some weird differings in how deals are actually structured. It's not like this is a gradual rollout. It's July 1 we're doing this. That kind of complicates things. Now, we will have more updates for you on all things Ohio State football. So make sure you guys are subscribed, youtube.com/GoBucks. We're not done, by the way. A bunch of the various key college sports leaders, so the ADs, the conferences, everyone else involved there, they're trying to get what's called the SCORE Act passed in Congress. And there's a variety of reasons for this, majority of which is to kind of re-add some teeth to the NCAA / the group in charge here. Big thing here, it's going to be a federal law to override the different state laws, in particular NIL. Because as of right now, the state NIL laws are not actually in compliance with what the House settlement is. So you're kind of stuck right back with like, these don't align, hypothetically, the laws in Ohio and the laws in Tennessee and the House settlement, they're all different. They don't have the same rules. So they're trying to establish, like, federally, legally, the CSC as, like, a power entity to make decisions and do stuff here. It also wants to, reenact some of the old NCAA preferences. This is why it's a mostly Republican-led thing, by the way. College athletes are not employees. They're going to have regulations for transfers and eligibility and recruit payments. Essentially, kind of override some of the state court decisions of, like, you can transfer as much as you want. And they're kind of trying to dial that back. Establish some rules. I do think requiring athlete agents to register is a good one, by the way, because the next, I think, big picture step here is some semblance of a college sports union. I do think you need good people involved with that and not people who are just out to make their own money. But I do think a college athlete union is probably a good idea to help get some guidelines established here. And now the danger is you get to high school and that's different because you can't have a high school union and it gets all very murky all of a sudden. My big take is this. The NCAA screwed this up for so long by refusing to allow anything resembling NIL that the pendulum went from such overriding control to no control, and it was chaos. But this stuff is also decidedly not free market. The stuff we're in right now is the epitome of a free market. Do whatever you want. There's no rules. Do whatever you want. Pay as much as you want. You're going to dial that back and have some regulations. And somewhere in the middle is the proper ground. Of note, by the way, specifically with that SCORE Act in Congress, any other previous efforts, all the other ones to get some federal legislation, has not worked. They haven't made any progress. It's never been a priority for congressional members and House representatives, and it's always just kind of failed on arrival, so to speak. So it might fail again this time. Maybe, maybe not. But that's kind of looking ahead to some other steps that are going to have to come as the world of college athletics changes and continues to change.